Morning, everyone. Welcome to the June 7th meeting of the Economic Development
Recording in
Commission.
progress.
That was me.
Okay, I will call the meeting to order, and the first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from the May 3rd meeting, which were distributed to everybody yesterday. If you didn't see them, hopefully you've had a chance to review them. I would entertain a motion to approve them. Welcome, Phil. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Okay, second?
Second.
Second, okay. Any corrections, additions, deletions? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it's unanimous. Okay, Sean, enlighten us.
Good morning. Outdoor dining. So this is basically the tail of the tape for 2024. 31 establishments are participating, which is down from 36 in the 2023 season. Total fees, and they're not quite complete, but I think they're very close to it, $48,000 in fees, down from $62,000 last year. And parking spaces utilized for outdoor dining, I calculated 18. I still need that confirmed, and it looks like last year there were 28. So a couple of mitigating factors. We're no longer in travel lanes, so that reduces fees. We're still in parking spaces, obviously, in loading zones. There seems to be more sidewalk activity, which increases fees, but it's a smaller space than the parking spaces. Who's missing this year? The Goat, Jumpin' Jays, Dwyer's. Gaslight, I can't recall if they were on last year or the previous year. Soul, Raleigh Wine Bar. And really the only new entrant is Litherman's, which replaced the District there on Vaughan Mall. So that's kind of a 23-24 comparison, and it looks like we're pretty complete.
So essentially 5 less. 2 of those are out of business, Seoul and Raleigh.
3 if you count Portsmouth Brewery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other 2 are travel lanes.
Couple of travel, really,
travel lanes. Yeah.
really just travel lanes. Yeah.
And I would guess that the parking spaces we've gained will make up a lot of that revenue as well.
I would like to think.
Okay, great. Any questions on outdoor dining?
No, thank you for the update.
You're welcome. Market Square Master Plan. The request was about, what was the summary from the public meeting? There is now a PowerPoint deck posted at Plan Portsmouth, under Plans, under Market Square Master Plan. And you can see the full output of the public meeting, which was held maybe 3 weeks ago or so.
The deck is really good. It really shows how we voted for all the things.
They did a nice job, I think, putting it together. And they also included at the end most recent survey results that they started to summarize. 435 online surveys have been taken with the QR code, and that's still ongoing. And for anybody who's planning on going to Market Square Day, Beta, the consultant, will be there all day tomorrow. So they are doing I think they're doing a great job of really seeking as much input as they can get and kind of processing it as they go. But Market Square Master Plan is moving forward.
Any questions on that? Just one observation, if anybody's interested in getting that information directly, you can sign up, receive the distributions. You don't have to have attended one of the sessions themselves.
That's right. Yeah, that came in my inbox a couple days ago
Great.
from signing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. I think that's really how we're trying to operate here, is if you want information, we can push it to you if you sign up.
Okay.
Parking Utilization Study Group. So we had a meeting yesterday, and just to give you this group a timeline, I think it's been about a year that I've been attending meetings, and they're really at the point. So yesterday, the focus was on finalizing the existing conditions, and we've seen those quite a few times as a working group, and then the consultant Desmond started to look at our zoning and see how that plays into our current state. And then the big exciting part is kind of future conditions and what the expectation is, and therefore kind of letting us know what we need to look at. But basically, the timeline for now is the final report is going to be done sometime in August. So from Desmond to the parking utilization study group, and there'll be reports and data in there to back up their findings. They're targeting to present this information to the City Council in September. I think it looks like the second meeting in September. Councilor Bagley was at the meeting yesterday talking about that. And once that is complete, then that'll kick off the next public meeting, which will be in October, where more of those findings will be put forth and shared with the public. So that is tracking pretty well.
Any questions on that? Are there any preliminary recommendations or anything being circulated?
Well,
or-
in general, we do pretty well as a municipality in that we control a lot of our parking inventory. There's some concerns about how similar the private parking signage looks to ours, and other municipalities have addressed that so that visitors and others don't get surprises, right? $8.50 an hour versus $2.50 an hour. If you go out long-term and all the growth and all the development and all the vacancies are filled in, we're going to need more parking. It's just a question of what does that look like? Are there spaces outside of the downtown core that can be better utilized? Is it as simple as adding a full parking garage? That's obviously, all those things are being considered, and I think when you look at currently where we're at, they're kind of looking at a current state, 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5, and then either it might be like 7 to 10, where things get. If everything stays on track, we're going to have a pretty good deficit of parking 10 years out, but a lot can happen in between that, right? So that's kind of the preliminary feel that I was grasping yesterday.
Just on the topic of parking, I thought I might ask on, I'm sure this is published somewhere, but the completion date for the High Hanover renovations, is that imminent, and how has that affected the utilization at the new garage? That kind of tracking on expectations?
Yeah, sure, I can speak to that. The garage is slated to be done fall of *25. So we are in year 2 of a third, and a third. And Foundry is seeing significant, consistent lack of vacancy, right?
Right, utilization,
Thank
right.
you.
Yes.
Great. And with 3 new projects coming online around it within the next 24 months, that's going to further drive that too.
That came up at the meeting yesterday. There is going to be some parking added at those, but there's also, it's basically a net loss if you look at some of the parking that's available today. So they're really, I think the consultant's doing a really good job of looking at all the different conditions and a lot of the what ifs, and it's going to, at the end of the day, right, it's going to be City of Portsmouth that makes a decision on which direction we go in and what the public wants.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? One other question. Is the discussion limited to number of spaces currently and projected demand versus supply, or are they looking at alternatives such as transportation, shuttles?
There was a conversation about that, so satellite parking,
Yeah.
and how to move people, whether it's employees downtown or whether it's visitors. So all those things, everything's on the table. That's kind of the idea, right? They're coming back with what they see in similar communities or what they've seen work. They use like kind of the national best standards for parking. And then it's really, at the end of the day, it's going to be what does the City of Portsmouth want? What are the people, what are the residents? And
Great.
but yeah, it's a lot. When they get into the technical stuff, I get a little bit of a headache. So I try to just distill down what I can bring here. But it'll all be available.
Great.
Okay. State of the City, if you haven't seen the presentation, the State of the City, it's got a lot of information in it. I think it was pretty well received. One of the things that came out of it, and Monty has already created a new web page, is the distinction between quality of life and quality of place. So quality of place is really what we, the collective city, has control over in terms of protecting our green space, our walkability, our accessibility, our water and our civic infrastructure. These are things that we can affect, as opposed to quality of life, which everyone kind of has to determine for themselves. Where am I at? Am I happy with this? Do I like my job? Do I like where I live? So quality of place is kind of the phrase that we've picked up on. And what Monty did is create a web page, a landing page, where all the things we're doing to protect and enhance our quality of place can be like a quick snapshot of like the climate action plan, right? The bike ped plan, all the things that we're working on to, again, protect and improve what draws people here, whether it's to live or to work or to visit. So just wanted to share that with you all.
Great. Would you like to comment on the wind lease issues at all?
I don't have much more than what I read, Tom. I mean, what my comment to Tom earlier was, I've been following the offshore wind. It is a very long game, and as Tom picked up in those notes, New Hampshire is really a little bit behind Maine and Massachusetts in the state of New Hampshire in really engaging in the process. So I think the next few months are going to be interesting to see how engaged the state and the Department of Energy at the state level get. We're here. We've got our infrastructure. We've got Granite Shore Power, who is very interested in what happens. But I think for us, for me, it's really just keeping an eye on what are the business opportunities, how do we serve the businesses here that could be involved, and is there a way to bring other energy businesses here, which is what Granite Shore Power is really looking to do, kind of create an energy park out there. So that's just my comment for this morning.
Okay. But just my observation I shared with you is I was really disappointed at how far behind that curve the state of New Hampshire is on this. And in the absence of some activity, it appears that Portland and Boston will be the beneficiaries of this potentially huge project.
Yeah, I do think the New Hampshire opportunity, certainly the Seacoast opportunity, is being in the supply chain. And there's going to be opportunities during the construction phase and certainly during the maintenance phase for us to be involved. But they have certain natural benefits in terms of their port facilities and other infrastructure. But I think there'll be some there.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it for me.
Any questions of Sean? Vince?
One of the things the city is looking at, or at least the city council has talked about, is making community power accessible to businesses and to the municipality. So I don't know about accessible to business, but we've talked about how the city might join that to get a higher percentage of renewable energy to the city. So I guess I'd be interested in seeing that extended to the business community as well as residential.
Do you know if there's any restrictions on the ability to have businesses or
I
municipalities?
don't know that.
I can speak to it a little bit. Peter Rice and I were speaking about this week, in fact, because we lock in certain rates for a certain period of time with suppliers. And CPC NH to date has not been able to match that kind of, I won't say service, but availability of rate. And that's important for us for budgeting purposes. So CPC NH realizes that they'll need to figure out a different model for supporting communities that need to budget. So right now, I believe we are in our current power procurement through October of 25, but it's time to renegotiate that now or to think about whether to renegotiate that now. So what we don't know is if CPC NH will be in a position to support us yet or if we do one more contract with a outside supplier. But we want to walk the walk and talk the talk. If we want to compel residents and businesses to go with CPCNH, we want to do that as well. But we're just as mindful, if not more mindful, of the fiscal stewardship piece of it. So we're looking at that right now. But maybe it makes sense for CPC to come talk to us,
Right.
talk to this group.
What about the business?
I know much less about that aspect than trying to make it work for them on the municipal side. And I think having CPCNH come and speak to how it could impact businesses and what businesses need to know that they may not in order to make a decision. But they have some staff now, they have some robustness, so I think it would be good to hear from them. Because previous to them having full-time staff, we were relying on all of us sort of volunteers and board members. But they do have standing staff.
Great. Made a note.
Okay, good idea. Other questions? Okay, we'll go to Ann, and she can tell us about these great phone calls she's having.
We have, but they have been great.
Absolutely.
We've had 2 deep dives since the last meeting. The first one was Jim Jalbert he owns C&J Bus, and I just think of him as C&J Bus. But in this instance, we need to think of him as, I think, the chair of the New Hampshire Transportation Council, and he's also on the national board for the American Bus something or other. So he really looks at a national and state level of all kinds of public transportation. And we didn't really talk a whole lot about the C&J part of it. It was really more other things. So I just kind of have a lot of bullet points. By the way, I have very detailed notes on all these meetings, and if they need to be circulated to all, let me know. I've only circulated them to the people who've been on the calls. But some of the things he kind of called out to us, that City of Dover worked with Rad Nichols at Coast and added school routes to the coastline, which saved money on their school bus transportation. I don't have any more detail than that, but it was an interesting one to think about. He said there are 3 hotel shuttles that loop into the C&J terminal, and he wondered if there was any way to incentivize collaboration on these shuttles. And I kind of passed that thought around to a few people, and I heard a rumor it was discussed at yesterday's Parking Utilization Committee.
It was.
And it was kind of going to be my next thought of, I guess somehow we need to figure out how to talk to the hotel people, but I think that's been lobbed to you guys, which is fine with me. And that was a conversation about, the way I heard it, the hotel shuttles plus employer shuttles.
Right.
What kind of something?
Is there a way to leverage some of the hotel shuttles?
So I'm going to pass that topic to you and not do a deep dive on that. He said the state of New Hampshire got $25 million in ARPA money for transit, and it's not all spent, and he does not know what's left, and he does not know what it can be used for or who can use it. So there's a question that someone might want to answer. Then he talked about CMAQ funds and 5307 funds, and I have a lot of details on that. CMAQ is Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program, and 5307 funds are Urbanized Area Formula Grants. And I mention those because then he had this, I call it inspiration from Jim. He said what he would do if he was the city of Portsmouth is he would pick 2 problem routes that are currently underserved, and he would run a 2-year pilot program of a loop serving those 2 routes, and he would use the CMAQ funds to pay for 80% of the pilot. City funds would pay for the other 20%, but there would be fare box recovery, which is your token, your fare that you pay, could supplement the 20% of the city. And then the 5307 funds, which come from the FTA, could potentially provide operating budget on a longer term. And if this was successful, the city could consider underwriting fares for the first year to incentivize riders, blah, blah, blah. Those were all things I really had to look up because he was throwing those terms out. You were nodding your head like, yeah, I know what that means. And I'm thinking, I'm just writing down words. I have no idea what this means. But I did find definitions of these 2 funding sources. I'm not sure as EDC, like, where do we lob that to? Do we lob that to you? Do we lob that to Sean? Like, I don't know. But here's Jim's inspiration, and it's it's kind of enticing, the way he threw that out. He did say there's been no successful microtransit that's currently operating in the state of New Hampshire. Any microtransit requires large subsidies. His quote, "These transit programs eat money." He's reaching out to board members of the American Bus Association for any observations they've seen on public transportation across the country. So that's kind of cool. And then he, too, said, you need to talk to Steve Pesci of Wildcat Transit, which we did a few weeks later, and so that's my part 2 of this. So while we're on C&J, does anybody want to comment on Jim Jalbert and all of that? It was really a pretty cool meeting. I think he could have talked for another 2 hours on it. About a week later, I got an email from him saying, look at this, we need to talk. And he had a, whatever that's called, New Hampshire, the Transportation Council meeting where an EV bus something group presented to them. And though he had told us that EV buses on really active routes aren't viable because there's too much charging time, this consulting firm that presented to them kind of turned that on its ear and said, no, there's a lot of developments happening there. So Jim really wants to talk about that. So I think Jim would like to talk to us all the time about all the cool things that he learns in the world of buses, and he is truly awesome. So that's Jim Jalbert.
Can I get a question?
Yep.
Yes.
I don't know if this came up in your conversation with him, but does he see the opportunities for the city to extend coast services or maybe supplement coast services with either commercial feeders for hotels or others? Or
Well,
did
he's
that
not coast, so I don't know.
right?
He didn't really.
But he's aware of coast. So
Oh,
what
yeah.
was his perspective on? I'm just thinking about the report out we had a few months ago where Coast was looking for folks to build their stuff closer to Coast's routes and infrastructure as opposed to extending into new
He
areas.
said he feels like Coast and Wildcat Transit almost compete with each other. There's not enough collaboration. There should be more conversations happening between the two, which was then the second conversation of moving to Wildcat and hearing it from their point of view. He also talked about the funding, how Wildcat Transit, where their funding comes from, which I'm skipping because when we talked to Wildcat Transit, it didn't line up with what Jim thought they were getting. Their funding is quite different than where Jim thought it was coming from. So I'm deleting that from Jim, because that was just Jim's opinion of federal funding that was coming to Wildcat, and that, in fact, is not the case. So, anything else? C&J, Jim?
Joe?
Yes.
Just a question. So when you mentioned kind of problem routes for the city, would that be existing coverage or gaps where people are having a hard time getting from where they are to accessing service? I'm just trying to conceptually understand that.
Well, one thing he
versus
talked,
microtransit.
or someone on the call mentioned, maybe it was you, that after school, getting kids home after, the kids who stay after school for later programs
Yep.
is a problem getting them home. So that's a problem route, is looping the school kids that stay till, whatever it is, sports or after-school care or whatever. That's a problem.
Right.
I think that was going to get lobbed to, like, maybe Eric Eby or somebody that understands where the problems are. He didn't seem to know what the problem routes were. And that, the after-school, the stay after-school bit was thrown out as one potential. So I don't have any insight on where those routes might be.
Sure.
And then moving on.
Hold on, we got another question,
yes.
Bob.
Well, you mentioned, the problem routes, and just got me thinking, what is the state of our transportation in the city? Do we have, like, maybe Eric Eby knows all this, but, where are the problems? And, it just doesn't seem to be, like, I don't have a good idea of
I feel like now
how
that
everybody gets around. And
Now that we've gotten
what-
these three, the Coast, C&J, Wildcat, it's almost like we have to kind of distill that together
Yeah.
and then talk to, maybe, is it Eric or somebody, of
And
how is this overlaying? And I'm working on a map on this,
yeah,
too,
kind of wondering,
trying to
like,
figure
what's-
it out.
What's the state of transportation now?
Yeah.
And what's the ideal? I don't know.
All good
I don't
questions.
know
And
much
where-
about
and-
it, you know
and
what
how
I
does
mean?
it evolve when we accommodate more built development
As
out on
these more
the Route 1
properties
corridor.
come
Right, so
online.
I think it's a matter of coordinating all that we know. So maybe when you give us the Wildcat update,
And what would
and then we
we-
can play a role in trying to coordinate it. But it's not our,
Right, it's not
infrastructure.
EDC's.
We make it an investment of over $800,000 to coast, and yet, we don't have ultimate authority over where the routes are. So could we play a role in coordinating it?
It seems to be a bit of a mess. There's a bunch of providers, but maybe it's just
Well, that's-
because I'm uninformed.
That's what we're trying to do here
The
is,
state of New Hampshire doesn't fund public transportation.
No.
Number one. And so we don't really have the infrastructure built out here that other communities around us do or would. And I'll look at Ben, but I mean, is a lack of public transportation hindering our business community?
It is from a worker
Yeah, I
perspective.
mean, workers are the name of the game right now.
Yes.
And you hear it from the hospitality industry, and that the routes end before the evening shifts end, and hospitality workers, restaurants, hotel workers, really don't have access to public transportation. They can get there, but they can't get home, so that doesn't really help. So yes, it does. What another piece of this is there's a lot of employers, not a lot, but there's several employers that are doing transportation on their own. They're bringing vans from Rochester and Somersworth and up from the North Shore to bring workers in. So which is a little frustrating because, rather than invest in a system that could do this, they're kind of doing it on their own and taking care of their own instead of, doing it, in a way that can be for the greater good. But I understand, their concern is their business and they have to solve it for their employees.
Right. I mean, transportation is another lever, right? There's a lack of employees. There is a lack of affordable housing to support securing more employees. There's lack of public transit to move those employees. But at the end of the day, it's not one single factor. It's not like people are
this is
lined up to get on a bus and there's no bus,
death by 100 cuts or whatever that
right? So
Sarah?
Yeah, I think one suggestion, and so you're doing exactly what the purpose of your working group is to study this. I think it would be useful to maybe distill what you learn into the various personas that might use public transportation, so student, worker, visitor, resident, and maybe see who's utilizing what service and where the gaps are as well, because I think I don't even think about public transportation as an option because like everybody else in America, it's easier to just jump in my car and go where I want. But if there was a regular loop around, Route 1 corridor to the downtown, I might use that more often even as a resident. But the awareness, the timing, the availability, and to your point around the gaps, understanding which personas are being served by which transportation services might help us understand where we need to focus or we could focus.
well, and originally, when you said public transportation, I didn't initially think of students or hotels. But you really have to think, and employees, all the moving people. But not pedestrians and bikes. Other people are working on that category.
Right.
Because I have had a few people send me a pedestrian and bike things to add to the mix, and I'm like, no.
Four wheels or nothing.
That's right. That's right. Well, I guess it could be two wheels, sort of, but yeah.
And before you go on to the next call, I thought that Jim's description of what he's doing for the shipyard is a good example of, again,
That's a
publicly
fantastic
funded, but,
project. I think, did we talk about it last meeting?
I don't think we did, so maybe why don't you
Shuttle.
explain that?
So Chinbro has a major construction project happening at the shipyard, and their influx of workers, there's already a chaotic influx of workers and cars and traffic and congestion at the shipyard and parking problems. And then when Chinbro added their workers to it, the shipyard, it was kind of like, no, this can't happen this way. So Chinbro has contracted with C&J, and they run a shuttle. There's a park and ride that's kind of behind Old Navy at the far end of the outlets. It was pretty, I looked for it on an aerial map. I thought they were just using like Old Navy's parking lot, but it's not. It's a very separate park and ride that's really not good access to any of the outlets, and it's pushed up against Route 95. That holds, I think he said 175 cars, that park and ride. So there's a shuttle loop running every 15 minutes, morning and afternoon, with a C&J bus, picking up workers at that parking lot. They don't wait in line at the shipyard when the bus comes into the queue. the bus goes to the front of the line. So boom, it's really fast transit. And I've heard horror stories of how long you wait in line to get through the gate at the shipyard to park. What has happened, and that the bus is open to anyone, but it's meant for the Chinbro workers. What has happened is that the buses are really filling up with regular workers because the regular workers also see it as the best way to get onto the shipyard. So it's been this extremely positive and successful project running these C&J shuttles. The shuttle is only slated to work, and maybe, I don't know, you guys might have more detail on this. It's Chinbro. So when Chinbro's construction project is over, technically, this bus shuttle is also over. So the shipyard needs and hopes to find a way to find financing something where they can keep this thing going because it's really alleviating some of their very, very heavy traffic problems. And maybe you know more on what happens, because I think it's good for another year and a half or 2 years or something.
About
something
that.
like that.
I only know that the shipyard has really investigated everything, about to alleviate their traffic and parking problems. I know they were talking about ferries from Dover, and literally everything was on the table. Like they could ferry people in. So it's been a constant battle, and everyone I know that works at the shipyard gets there at 4 a.m. to avoid the traffic.
Avoid the traffic.
Yeah.
And I did see in the paper there's a loop going to start to happen in Sanford or Biddeford or
Yeah, they have shuttles that
Was it Sam?
come in already.
Yeah.
The shipyard actually does that.
But the shipyard's doing for same thing, and those shuttles go straight through the gate. They don't wait in line.
And my dad works at the shipyard. Well,
So you've heard
until
that.
August. He's retiring after 30 years. But they have a subsidy also that they give to their workers to pay for public shuttle transportation.
Oh,
so
okay.
there are programs available at the shipyard that could potentially supplement, future transportation if folks took advantage of it. And some of the feedback is what if I have to leave off cycle? So the model of the satellite parking with the buses running in a loop would work for
It's
that.
really good. Yeah.
You were going to say something, Sean?
Well, just this conversation came up in the parking meeting yesterday, and part of the issue is if you're going to look at that type of model downtown, you really have to pull together a lot of employers versus a shipyard, which has that concentration, which also has the shifts, which also has it's very defined, and so they can make decisions on a bus lane versus the car. So it becomes this behavior change issue, right? They started talking about P's, same thing. You've got big companies with shifts with lots of humans going out there at the same time. The difference is you don't have a parking problem per se at P's.
Right.
So there's not necessarily a need. But again, the parking group wants to look at it. It would just look different if it's downtown because you don't have these massive organizations with hard,
very
fast
different
shifts
scenario.
of people
Yeah, what
coming
the
en
shipyard
masse.
does.
Yeah. So it's everyone's talking about it. But the shipyard, and to Ben's point, because I've done a lot of work with the shipyard, they are not immune from all of these challenges. And despite a 40-year backlog of work and being the U.S. Navy and all this, they don't have bottomless pockets. They can't just, build something or hire a fleet of buses. They have to cobble things together, just like the rest of us.
It is a recurring problem. I think we had the conversation about the shipyard shuttles and employees and talking about building units in the malls and stuff like that 5 years ago.
And here we
Other
still are.
questions on Java before we hear about Wildcat?
All right, Wildcat Transit. That was Steve Pesci, who's the head of something at
He's the
UNA.
vice chair of and he's vice chair of the Parking and
Of
Transportation.
Parking and Transportation.
And Traffic Safety Committee
Yep,
here.
he lives in Portsmouth. And Beverly Cray was on the call from UNH. She's the operations manager. Wildcat Transit's very focused on moving students. So they're going to put their travel loops, where there are students. So that's first and foremost. They're not going to put a loop on a route that doesn't really have students living there. So that's their basis is moving students and getting students to campus and to recreation. Their loop in Portsmouth includes Islington, Bartlett, Maplewood, Woodbury, and some little interconnecting things. And they run 2 loops at the same time. One's going clockwise and one's going counterclockwise, so that you could come into Market Square and then go back out without having to ride the whole loop around, like honestly, to Durham and back, to get back and forth. Say if you were going to say Market Basket to on Woodbury to downtown, you could do that one way and then back the other way. And during the semesters, they have 13 round trips a day on weekdays, 7 round trips on weekends, and then off-season, which is summer and breaks, it drops down to 6 round trips daily with no weekends. They aim for 14 passengers a trip. More than that is optimal, but 14 is the minimum, and they run till 9:30 at night. What their revenue, though Jim was thinking there were federal places, there aren't. It's financed by student activity fee and campus parking revenue. Students pay, I think it's $160 a year activity fee, and that goes to Wildcat Transit. And then when you pay to park on campus, or you get a parking ticket on campus, that all goes to Wildcat Transit. So it seems to balance their operating budget with what they get. Wildcat Transit accepts Coast passes. Coast accepts Wildcat Transit passes. 60 to 70% of the drivers are UNH students. UNH trains students to get their CDL license. That also means every year at graduation, they lose about half their drivers. So it's a constant training of drivers, of student drivers, but kids really like the job. So there's a something. They are sad about the loss of the bus zone in Market Square. They said it's making their pickups a little more arduous there, though they did say they're only stopped for like 2 minutes. So something to keep in mind that both Coast and Wildcat said they missed that parking thing. Their future aspiration is to use federal grants. Now, they do get federal grants for capital projects. They would like to use federal grants to upgrade to an all-electric fleet. They get electricity that comes from the cogen facility at the Rochester landfill, is piped to UNH. They turn that into electricity. If they had electric buses, they could charge their buses at night with the excess electricity and actually run their fleet for free. So that is their kind of pie-in-the-sky aspiration, which is pretty cool, since that gas is already flowing to them. Here's the surprise fact of the call. Did you know that anyone can ride Wildcat Transit? Because I did not know that. All of us can ride Wildcat Transit. It's $1.50 a ride. It's half price for old people like me and people with disabilities. There's an app. You can actually go into their website, and there's a real-time GPS tracker, and you can watch, sort of like on an Uber, you can watch your bus move. They do try to stay close to schedule, but he said, you got to understand it's a lot of college students, so sometimes the buses get a little off schedule, but you can watch it coming to you. Their biggest challenge is bringing awareness that anyone can ride their buses. So I looked at their schedules, and the thing that kind of popped out to me, knowing that anyone can ride the bus, is there's this loop going both ways that's basically Market Square, Woodbury, Islington, Maplewood. It's that loop. And when you get out on the outer end, there's parking out there. So one of the stops is 170 Commerce Way, which is behind Market Basket on Woodbury. The stop on Commerce Way is straight across the street from Novacure. Novacure is looking for ways to find parking for their employees in their new downtown location. I'm just throwing this out as a pie in the sky. I'm not really saying this is what Novacure needs to do. However, Novacure is right across the street from a Wildcat Transit stop, and the bus stops there at like 8:10 and 8:23, something like that. 13 minutes later, that bus is in Market Square. Maybe that's a way for Novacure to move their people from Commerce Way into their new location in Vaughan Mall. The bus also stops at the malls, and there's a giant parking arena. So maybe there's something here on these loops of looping people. Wildcat Transit would love to put more bodies on their buses. Their buses are standing room only in Durham. They're not standing room only here. He said there may be, on a good day, they're half full. They're just aiming for those 14 passengers. So the more that we can do to help Wildcat plug people onto those buses, the more viable their buses become. So that was just I thought, I think there's something there, I'm just not sure what that thing is, but I never knew that Wildcat Transit was a viable thing to use for moving anyone other than students, faculty.
So they have
and
a
staff.
loop just in Portsmouth?
Yes. They have two, they run.
So they said
Why did
that,
they do that?
well, I mean, the loop starts in Durham, it comes down.
Because their students want
Where is-
access to Portsmouth.
We
Yeah,
count
but it
as the
goes From
recreation,
Durham to Portsmouth
Yes.
Durham to Portsmouth.
and vice versa.
Back.
But it loops around this loop when they get here because of the two going both ways. You don't have to go the whole way to Durham
Right.
to return.
Right.
So it loops, was it Woodbury, Islington, Bartlett, Maplewood, Woodbury, if you picture that as the actual loop. We asked them about adding routes like Lafayette Road, and he said, we don't have students there.
So just to that point, I recall Steve saying that basically because Wildcat Transit is funded by students, that's kind of their mission. They can't spend student money to move other people in Portsmouth that are not
Right.
students because those folks are paying for it.
So they're not going to add a route that doesn't serve a certain number of students. They used to run Wildcat Transit to Newmarket, but Newmarket has become gentrified, and very few students live in Newmarket. So
they
the
stopped.
bus no longer goes to Newmarket. Not viable. They were running 5 kids in a bus, and that's below their threshold of 14. So I think it's really important to keep the Portsmouth routes full enough that we wouldn't lose Portsmouth. And so that's why it's kind of valuable to us to help. It's sort of that things you didn't know
Right.
category of did you know that you can ride Wildcat Transit?
Sarah?
Go to a
Yeah.
game or something in Durham, right?
I know. Take Wildcat Transit. They were more willing to add stops. Coast was kind of like, not going to happen. Turns into spaghetti. But Wildcat said, you know, if suddenly there's a housing area somewhere near our loop that we have a bucket of students in, they'd be willing to move a stop or shift a stop or make it better for students.
Well, yeah, as I recall, the issue really is that there are fewer and fewer students, UNH students, who live in Portsmouth. That's
Who live
partially.
anywhere off. who
Well,
live
yeah, that's
outside of
partially due
Durham
that
in
they
general.
built so many private housing units in Durham over the last 10 years that all the surrounding cities have less student population. And
He said they've added 2,500 units of privatized student housing on the perimeter of Durham.
Right. But so part of that problem is it's a shrinking market, and they can't just create another route unless there's enough students on it. And so they said, frankly, their focus right now is Dover more than Portsmouth. And if it wasn't for the students wanting to come here for entertainment purposes, I'm not even
This is the
sure.
entertainment and recreation
Right.
loop, and Dover is the housing loop.
Is there a regional transportation consortium that all of these groups get together at, or are they typically dedicated to municipalities? That's it?
Yes. There's a regional transportation map that the Rockingham Planning Commission puts out, and my understanding from UNH Wildcat was that all of the transportation routes are dropped onto this map, so you can see everybody at the same time.
So there's a map, but is there a regular meeting group that has participation from all of the various?
I don't know. I feel like it should be through the RPC, if there is one,
Yeah,
but I don't know.
I think those regional planning committees talk about transportation regularly. I don't know if there's a standing committee, but
But this,
That would be
the
the
map
place.
doesn't actually have the routes. So guess who's sitting at home with highlighters trying to
Well, and we also
figure
have
out where the overlap
the
is?
state and the municipal boundaries. We talk about the shipyard. The majority of the workers there are from Maine. So I feel like that anything that's sort of funded or managed from a regional or local perspective isn't necessarily going to take into effect the Maine that's sitting right over there as well.
That's true. That's true.
Low coast does go into Maine.
Yeah, that's true. Coast Guard.
One of the observations I had in that call is how Coast doesn't talk to Wildcat at all. So you've got them at very close sites where they're having their drop-offs and pickups, but there's no signage that would suggest that. So if you wanted to if you were a student who lived in Lafayette Road and you wanted to go public transportation, you could get a Wildcat to Market Square, and you potentially could get a coast down to Lafayette Road, but
You could blend
there's
them.
no signage, there's no hours posted, you'd have to be working two apps at the same time, and so part of it is there's no
Connectivity.
communication.
Well, he said their signage is old and it's soon due to be replaced, and a lot of it is co-signage with Coast, and they're all
They do.
all old, and a lot of their stops they share. They're co-located with Coast, but the bus stops are old and antiquated. The signage is old. He feels like that's part of their visibility problem. If they could work together with Coast and maybe the city, I don't know, and create new, better signage, new, better bus stops. And then another one of his, wishful thinking was that there would be a transportation hub near the center of Portsmouth, that all the buses, Coast, Greyhound, and Wildcat, would all share this transportation hub. He thought the Bridge Street lot was the perfect place for it. I know we want to give up all that parking for a transportation hub.
I think he said that was
so
talked about
He said down
years ago.
that area, Bridge Street lot area, and I just don't know that there's a place to do that,
Or is there
or a need. I don't know.
Is there enough need?
I don't know. And I think he was saying that in that the bus drop-off in Market Square that is gone right now, he was kind of saying, well, if we shifted that whole thing, we don't have to have a bus drop-off in the center of Market Square, but if there was a unified bus drop-off that everyone was using and
Right.
was signaged well,
Right, and it got them to
Somewhere-
Market Square within a reasonable walking distance.
5-minute walk,
Yeah.
that would be really helpful. So that was one of his sort of action items that he threw out there. So I feel like we've done these three, we're shifting the hotel conversation to you, and I don't know that the school bus conversation is really in our purview. That seems,
Sean and I can talk with the schools.
yeah, seems like it. So I feel like now that we've got all this, maybe for next month, we'll sort of distill this into just sort of one action item. Here's some recommendations coming out of this, see if we can get some actual things to move forward, pass on to council or something like that.
Vince?
I just had a thought, and I mean, this doesn't exist that I know of, but maybe it would be good, is that if an app like Park Mobile and the bus route was all one, and somehow a coordinated app that you could use to get around the region and Portsmouth.
That's what I was thinking of, having just come back from San Francisco. There's the Bay Area Rapid Transit, which is a bunch of different services. So you can say, I want to go from here to here, and even though they're different services, you can figure out where to go. But if I didn't have your information about Wildcat being available, I never
We'd
would have
never
known.
know that. I don't think anyone on the call had any idea that regular non-UNH people can ride Wildcat Transit. I had no idea.
Yeah.
So they definitely have a marketing problem on that if that's something they're trying to do.
May you see the map, Al?
Okay, I want to get to our other presentations as well, but, so do you anticipate having any additional conference calls, or?
If anyone has suggestions for one, but I feel like the hotels are dealt with and you'll do school buses. What am I missing?
Just one potential would be, until I read an article probably about a month and a half or so ago about Port City Air, I assumed they were just selling fuel to airplanes, but it turns out handling all the crews that are coming in for different air forces, and so they're taking care of their hotel rooms, their transportation, they're moving people around, catering the whole shooting match. So I wonder if there's some lessons that we can learn from them. I'm not sure what the name of the owner of the company is, but
I've met him. I can make the connection.
sure, that would be great. Why don't you coordinate with Ann, and it'd be worth potentially having a call with him, and then we could work toward coming up with some assembly of this information, a couple recommendations. I mean, I can think of a couple already, but I think a little more fact gathering. Okay, let's go on to the business support. Now, Andy received a text from him saying he was sick today, so he won't be able to report out. Is there somebody else with his group that could tell us what has happened? I know there's been some
Probably
conference
Sean.
calls.
Well,
Yeah.
you're dealing with this.
So, yes, yes.
Yeah, so I think you probably have the most information.
I can certainly provide information.
You may proceed.
So there were two topics that the business support working group tackled. One was the inspection process, and the reminder is that we've invited Shanti Wolf, our director of the inspections department, to be with us on July 3rd. He would have been here today, except his son is graduating. So, and the group has worked with him on some questions, and so he'll be prepared to talk about the process and how it works and some statistics and what might also be on the horizon for continuing to improve how the city interacts with developers, builders, residents. So that's coming July 3rd. Okay, more to come on that. And we'll recirculate the letter that he sent a couple of months ago just to make sure folks are in the mindset to ask questions and fully understand how it's working.
I don't think the whole commission has seen that,
No?
the February letter. That was just within that working group.
Okay.
So see if he wants to, if he wants to update it.
Sure.
and We'll circulate that before the next meeting.
Right, so that's on for July 3rd, which is a Wednesday. And the other topic we're tackling is the CRM, and what we came to after a couple of meetings, and I had another conversation with the vendor, is rather than trying to launch a full CRM, we're really trying to focus on two-way communication with the business community, so breaking it down into integrating Outlook with the CRM tool and really piloting pretty quickly some short surveys, see what comes back. What is the level of engagement? And the one thing I've been asking for a while is this opt-in form to basically say if you want to be engaged with the Office of Economic Development and by extension EDC, information into the CRM. So those are the two issues that the group is tackling. That's where we are.
Questions of
Yeah.
John? Am I correct that the conclusion of the CRM vendor is that they can't do the pinpoint audience where they're just doing hospitality or?
No, we have updated because it was put in probably almost a year ago. We have the ability to tag it by NAICS code, by industry, and also by location in Portsmouth. So whether you're downtown core, West End, Lafayette Road, Pease. So there's a couple of tags or labels that allow me to sort the information.
Okay. Do you think you'll be doing a test on that in the near future, or what's your time frame, I guess, is the question?
The time frame for what I just talked about in terms of integrating with Outlook and the ability to do the two-way communication, the vendors get up till the end of June to come back with something for us to look at, see if we can work with it. So then after that, I can update the group.
Okay. All right. Ben, you want to give us a chamber update?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Just a few things. Art Round Town is tonight, first Friday of the month. I will just point out a couple newer folks that are participating in that. Robin Thornhill Fine Art on State Street is new to that, and I think relatively new to the community. And then there's a really nice woodworking studio on Penn Hollow at 15 Penn Hollow, Urban EAD Woodwork, kind of new to Portsmouth, actually is expanding his shop. Last time I talked to him, and taking over another storefront there in Penn Hollow. So really nice stuff. You may want to stop by and visit them. And then I'll just mention on behalf of the 400th that they have their book signing tonight at the Historical Society. So if you want to join them for that as well. So that's Art Around Town. A couple recent events that were very successful. State of the City. Thank you to the city manager and Sean and the mayor for spending time with us on May 28th. And then just a couple nights ago, we had a kickoff for Pride Month with the business community and our friends at Seacoast Outright. That was on June 5th. That was well attended and a great event despite some horrific thunderstorms going on outside of biblical proportions. It was exciting. A couple things just to come up. We do have the conclusion of our Celebrate Her series on June 13th with a presentation that morning and then a gathering at the 801 that evening. That'll be a really fun event. That's been a very great series. It's been nice to pull the women business leaders together and create a good community for them. Also on the 20th is our annual meeting. It's a very exciting night where we welcome new board members and thank outgoing board members. And this year we're thanking Russ Grazier for 6 years of being on the Chamber Board, Wendy Clement from Kennedy Gallery for 6 years, and many of us know Lisa Gainty, a banker formerly with TD and now with Bank Prov, who we pieced this together last night. She's come and gone from the board a few times. In total, she has served 15 years on the Chamber's board. So we're got to do something nice for her. I don't know exactly what yet, but Lisa's been fantastic. We did just host a meeting with our Restaurant Week participants. There'll be some changes coming to Restaurant Week for the fall of 2024. I think everyone knows costs are up in the restaurant industry, cost of food, cost of labor, and some feedback we received from some of the higher price point restaurants that participate in Restaurant Week is that they're kind of losing money on it, and because they want to provide the experience that someone comes to their restaurant, they expect a certain level, and it's hard to do that at the price point of Restaurant Week. So we're actually probably going to have 3 tiers of pricing instead of 2, and so we'll hopefully be able to welcome a wider range of restaurants to Restaurant Week in the future. That's all being driven by those labor and food costs. Membership for the Chamber is up. We looked at that the other day. We're about 775 members. Last year this time we were about 730 members, so some good growth year over year. Pleased with that. We don't really set growth targets. We want that growth to happen organically. We want people to come to us. We don't really do marketing or phone blitzes or anything crazy like that. We try to offer good things and let people find us and let that word of mouth do its thing, and it seems to be working for us. The last thing I do want to mention is earlier this week, and Sean was there and can attest to this, we have a monthly meeting with some tourism members, and there's some, I don't want to say red flags, but certainly some caution flags being thrown out about the occupancy rate at our hotels so far this spring has not been as strong as they would have expected. And I know from talking to a few retailers that foot traffic numbers have been steady with previous years, but sales have not, which means people are doing a little bit more window shopping, maybe a little more day tripping and not the overnight stays. So there's a little enough people said it where there's a little, to pay attention to it. So we'll see how the season comes together. And what holds over the next couple months, but there is a little bit of concern out there in the hospitality industry that the season may not be as strong as maybe previous years or that they had hoped. So that's what I had to share this morning, but let me know if you have any questions.
Phil?
Ben, I'm just curious on the membership growth. That's awesome to hear. Are you seeing new businesses formed in town, or where has that new membership come from geographically?
It's mostly in town, yeah, and it's a little bit of everything. We have been really intentional about outreach to different communities that haven't necessarily been engaged, BIPOC communities, LGBTQ plus communities, and some of that is bearing interest and fruit for us. But we are also seeing a number of sort of longstanding businesses in our community that feel the need to market more now. and restaurants like that that have been members of our community for years and never really been engaged with us are now engaged with us because they feel that need to market. I think people are realizing that the years of like just putting the open sign up and letting the door open and floodgates happen is probably not what we're experiencing right now, and they have to work a little harder and do some marketing to get to their customers. So we're seeing some interest in the hospitality space from some folks we've never seen interest before.
That's great. Thank you.
Other questions? Anna?
Yeah, I have a question about the hospitality issue. Do you know by any chance whether it's coming from individual visitors or corporate, conventions or corporate meetings? What's the percentage of each?
I don't know percentage. I do know it's both, though. It's, typically the hotels, look at that leisure travel at the weekend business and then try to do their best to fill with business groups and meetings and small conventions, 100-person, 200-person conventions during the week. And the small meetings are doing okay, the 30, the 40s, like that sort of thing. But the larger, they're not seeing as many of those. So there's concern for that. They didn't mention I don't recall them mentioning anything about weddings, like they do a lot of weddings and things like that, but they didn't mention that, so maybe that is not of a concern. But it is down on both sides a little bit, which is unfortunate.
I would understand corporate because of virtual capabilities now. I see that in the public accounting space. Some of the conventions take place virtually instead of
Yeah, I
meeting in
think
person.
what I've observed them saying is, in COVID, everything went virtual, obviously, and then there was this like surge of like, okay, we can get back and we're going in person again, and we probably rode a little wave there. And now, I think probably people are, figuring out we can do some of this virtually, and there's a lot more tools out there now to do these meetings and things virtually. So,
Right.
I'm not sure. Eventually, it'll even out and they'll figure it out. But right now, I think we're still figuring that
Okay.
out.
Thank you.
I have a question, Ben. When we were here last time, you had just wrapped up the restaurant week, so you didn't have any numbers on number of meals or sold, et cetera. Do you have those numbers now?
We still are. Believe it or not, restaurants aren't the most forthcoming with some of that stuff. You have to sort of follow up a few times to get those responses out of them. So we're still tracking that down. We do have several of those results in. The numbers were positive for just about everybody. We compare it to the 10 days prior and the 10 days post. And we compare the same days of the week, so the Thursday to the Saturday of prior and post. And certainly everyone was up from the prior 10 days. There were a few restaurants that were that continued to increase the 10 days after, and some of that could just be weather and larger groups and functions and things like that they had. But for the most part, everyone was up from the 10 days prior. So it was good numbers. And that's kind of typical. We see the reverse of that in the fall where 10 days prior might have been higher than the 10 days. Just kind of seasonal weather. There's a lot of factors at play there.
Great. Other questions of Ben? Thank you. Vince, you want to give us a city council update?
Sure. As you can imagine, we've spent most of our time on the budget. And we did pass the $138.6 million budget, which was just slightly above what we had asked for in terms of a percentage increase. The increase is most onboarding and all that stuff. So I think
I just want to correct, 138 was the current fiscal year that we're in now, so it's going to be 144.
144. I'm sorry.
I wish it could be the stay at the 138, but it will
Yeah.
rise to 144 million.
And we've been looking at the police station, and we pretty much agree that we want it at the City Hall. There's a lot of questions about, and so there's questions about scale, massing, location on City Hall, and there's a lot of resident input from that already. So we have a lot of work to do on that, but I think the decision of having it in this location is probably a good decision, as long as we can make it work. The least expensive is pushing it out the front, and that's the least popular. So I guess we have to make a decision of whether we want to, how we want to deal with that. That's an ongoing discussion. I know, as you remember, we changed character zoning to include both for conditional use permit to include both workforce housing and open space. The staff came back to the council with they found that there is a potential loophole in the way the ordinance was written, and so we made a correction to that, and I think that was important. I mentioned earlier that we're looking at community power for the municipality, and then we also passed the home. Well, that's actually scheduled to pass on the 17th, the home occupation ordinance, making that a lot more accessible to people. I don't know, you have more? I know.
It's good.
Yeah,
It's been a busy stretch.
it's been a busy, well, mostly the budget. Yeah.
Great. Any questions of Vince? Okay. Well, that concludes the regular agenda. I'll open it for public comment. Would you like to say anything, Steve?
Well, I'd like to thank you in advance. I've been talking to 2 or 3 of you, Tom and Sean and Bob, and I'll be writing a story in indepthnewhampshire.org. I don't know if you've been to that website, but it's a good news site, worth checking out. So that's it from me.
Okay, thank you. Sean?
Just one thing I'll share with the EDC. With my other group, the Public Art Review Committee, they put out an RFP for Pierce Island art installation, which is part of the Percent for Art from the water treatment plant. And they're going through that process. They're down to finalists. They're going to be conducting interviews next week. So stay tuned for that. I can't share any specifics, but the process is moving forward. The public art on Pierce Island.
Can I share one more thing, Tom?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I meant to share this earlier and I forgot. I think everyone is aware that the City Council recently made a bunch of zoning changes in the Gateway District and welcomed more parcels into that district, one of those being the parcel behind Service Credit Union, where they want to build affordable housing, and particularly housing for veterans and seniors and workforce. They have a charrette that's open to the community, and I think it would be a really educational opportunity for everyone to participate in that. There's a Thursday evening of June 20th. It'll start with a walk of the property and then come in, and you actually get into small groups and get to sort of throw concepts out, and you have landscape and architects with you, and kind of get to design it a little bit, and all those come together the next day, and there's a whole day of a design team working on these proposals, and there's different concepts that get developed. It's going to be really interesting, and get to sort of see the next layer down of how these projects come together, and that's open to anyone in the community, particularly the Thursday night. They are hoping that their abutters, their neighbors, come out and share interests and concerns and things like that they have about the project. So I would encourage anyone that has that kind of flexibility to either participate in that Thursday evening, the 20th, or the day on the 21st. Should be quite interesting, and certainly more transparent way of going about these projects. So.
Do you know what time that walkthrough is?
The walk, yes, I do. Hang on. The walkthrough is, I believe, at 4:30 on the Thursday the 20th, 4:30 to 5:30, and then there's a little break, and then there's an evening thing until about 8.
Is the session, other than the walkthrough, in the
Yeah, it'll
credit
be in
union
Service
building?
Credit Union's headquarters there in Lafayette. And if anyone needs any more information, just let me know. I can share. There's a flyer that you can share and register.
Great, great. Any other comments, new business? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all.